Welcome to meeting number 21 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology. Pursuant of the order of reference of Saturday, April 11th, the committee is meeting for the purpose of receiving evidence concerning matters related to the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Today's meeting is taking place by video conference, and the proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. I would like to remind the members and witnesses, before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. When you are ready to speak, please unmute your microphone and then return to mute when you are finished speaking. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly so that the translators can do their work. As is my normal practice, I will hold up the yellow card for when you have 30 seconds remaining, and I will hold up the red card for when your time for questions is expired. I would like to now welcome our witnesses. From the Chemistry Industry Association of Canada, we have Madame Isabelle Deschaines, Executive Vice President. De la Groupe Robert, Jean-Robert Lessard, Conseiller spécial Relations publiques et gouvernementales. From Hoffman Laroche Limited, Logan Karagata, Director, Federal Government Affairs and Policy, Access Division. Fanny C., Strategic Healthcare Partner, Artificial Intelligence and Digital Health. And from the Montreal Port Authority, Mr. Daniel Dagenet, Vice President Operations. Each witness will present for 7 minutes, followed by the round of questions. And with that, we will begin with Madame Deschaines. You have the floor for 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's my pleasure to be with you today on behalf of Canada's chemistry and plastics manufacturers. You may be aware that Canada's chemistry sector generates nearly $60 billion a year, making us the third largest manufacturing sector in the country. This is split almost evenly between pharmaceutical and industrial grade chemicals, the latter of which I will speak to you today. Before I begin my formal remarks, however, I would like to extend our sector's appreciation to Parliament and the Government of Canada for the extraordinary and timely measures taken to support Canadians and Canadian businesses during this unprecedented time. I have 3 messages to share with you today. They'll be easy to remember as they're a bit of a take on the 3 R's. The chemistry sector is resilient, responsive, and well poised to lead Canada's economic recovery. First, our sector is resilient. There have been no material impacts to our companies or their supply chains. Most of our industry continues to operate at normal levels of production. Some have seen production decreases while still maintaining operations, and others are experiencing production increases. The sector so far has not required economic supports and has experienced very limited layoffs. Second, our sector is highly responsive. Canada's chemistry sector produces important water treatment and disinfection chemicals essential for public safety. These have been in extremely high demand to support the COVID-19 response. Plastics also play an important sanitary role for medical and food packaging purposes and are inputs into PPE or personal protective equipment. Demand for these products has increased significantly as a result of COVID-19. Our members have also reconfigured value chains and production activities to assist in the response. For example, Shell Canada, BASF Canada, and Procter & Gamble have all reconfigured operations to make hundreds of thousands of liters of hand sanitizer, which they have donated to hospitals and community support organizations. Also, led by BASF Canada and TriMac, both CIAC members, our sector has supported the development of the Rapid Response Platform. This platform matches PPE producers with those who have PPE needs. In its first 3 weeks of operation, more than 25,000 PPE matches have been successfully completed through the platform. Finally, while being resilient and responsible, the sector is also poised to contribute to Canada's economic recovery. Over $7 billion of capital investments are currently underway and scheduled to come into production in late 2021, early 2022. We anticipate that a significant portion of the additional $11 billion committed or announced in capital investments that were deferred due to COVID will materialize to assist in the recovery. All of our facilities have deferred scheduled major maintenance activities, and it will be of utmost priority to get these projects underway as soon as possible. These projects can involve thousands of contractor staff and total in the hundreds of millions of dollars, injecting much needed capital into the economy. In addition, Alberta, Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia are all looking towards the chemistry sector for significant additional investment growth beyond that already announced. Let me close by offering two pieces of advice on what Canada can do to support future growth in Canada's chemistry and plastics sectors. First, it is essential that the Government of Canada embrace the investment growth potential of the chemistry sector. As the fundamental building blocks of the modern world, chemistry solutions will play a vital role as we build the post-COVID-19 economy. The Government of Canada should work collaboratively and in a coordinated manner with the provinces to deliver a Team Canada approach to attracting global investment to the sector. Governments working together have benefited Canadians in the response to COVID-19. We need to see the same coordinated approach as we restart and grow our economy. Second, while it needs to maintain its focus on addressing the challenging issue of plastic pollution in the environment, the Government of Canada must use tools other than the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, and in particular, its Schedule 1 list of toxic substances to regulate plastic waste. Declaring plastics toxic in Canada will greatly undermine the confidence of global investors. It will deliver a message that Canada is indeed ambivalent about growing the sector, despite the resilience, responsiveness, and economic opportunity demonstrated throughout the crisis. Thank you again for providing me with the opportunity to speak with you today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Notre prochain témoin est...
Our following witness is Mr. Jean-Robert Lessard. You have 7 minutes, sir. Hello, and thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to share with you something of what we've been doing during this COVID-19 crisis. On the 12th of March, our group made its first efforts and took charge of the situation by setting up a crisis management and daily communication committee to work with all its employees. Since then, the committee has put in place several measures, including, among others, stopping visitors from coming to its site, except for essential suppliers, of course, for whom a voluntary declaration form is to be completed. Well, actually, it's mandatorily completed before they're admitted to the site. We've stopped business travel, and we have made special use of communication technologies such as Skype and Microsoft Teams. Groupe Robert has also channeled all questions and suggestions from its employees to a single email address, namely covid19@robert.ca. Moreover, a host of hygiene measures have been developed and implemented based on recommendations, of course, of Public Health Quebec and Public Health Canada. Employees enter through a single door that has a hand washing station, and we also take their temperature. For our drivers, a disinfectant use protocol has been set up for cleaning their trucks. And, of course, these measures are mandatory. The housekeeping team has, as is understandable, multiplied its cleaning rounds of the premises. Moreover, our mechanical upkeep team is also disinfecting all instruments and tools that it uses before and after use. To support physical distancing in shared areas, we have modified our break and meal times. So the beginning of the school holiday made it possible to put into quarantine many of our employees who were coming back from the March break. And of course, the hygiene rules are part of our daily life now. Physical distancing, hand washing, and of course, coughing into the elbow. The creation of our special COVID-19 specialist team, made up of 3 health and safety employees allowed us to give them a very specific mandate to keep up with all relevant information and become the resource people whom everyone can consult to avoid any false information, misleading information, or misunderstanding of guidelines. Also to handle all the confusions of employees. We have training sessions used to share best teamwork management for all our managers. It's important to mention as well that we have set up a number of protocols to be respected if any of our employees are test positive for COVID-19. So far, only 8 of our employees have fallen ill. So to summarize, we have reduced schedules, reduced work hours, and online work now, and this has allowed us to redeploy our personnel to new duties and avoid laying them off. We also think it worth mentioning the excellent cooperation between the union and employers. We have established an employer-employee forum in order to collaborate in our messaging. As I've said, we have seen only 8 of our employees fall ill with COVID-19, and we're pleased to report that all of them have now recovered. At the height of the crisis, we temporarily laid off 459 people. Groupe Robert is pleased to have realized during this period of crisis that our strength is our employees. Our employees tried to find solutions and to accomplish things together. Throughout our 73 years of existence as a company, we have learned how to overcome challenges such as this one. And the best way to do so, from what we've learned, is to work as a team. Thank you so much, Mr. Lessard.
Hoffman Laroche Limited, you have the floor for 7 minutes.
Madame la Présidente et honorable membres du comité.
Madam Chair and honorable members of the community, for Hoffman Laroche, we would like to thank you for giving us the pleasure of addressing you here today. We applaud the federal government's work and the health services work to fight COVID-19 and protect our economy.
Pharmaceutical and diagnostics company focused on advancing science and improving health outcomes for patients. Our combined strengths have made Roche a leader in personalized healthcare, a strategy that aims to tailor the right treatment to the right patient at the right time. In 2019, we invested $284 million in research and development, with $57 million in clinical research in Canada. Most recently, we announced a $500 million investment over 5 years to establish a global site, bringing up to 500 highly specialized jobs to Mississauga. There are a number of initiatives Roche is working on to address some of the challenges associated with the pandemic. Phase 3 clinical trials are underway to study the safety and efficacy of one of our medications in hospitalized adult patients with severe COVID-19 pneumonia. On the diagnostics front, our molecular test was approved under Health Canada's Special Access Program and contributes to a significant portion of testing across Canada. We have also submitted our antibody test for approval, which we are expecting shortly. We are very pleased about the potential of this test as we begin to move into the recovery phase and engaging with the COVID-19 Immunity Task Force to combine our efforts. Another initiative we're very proud of is our Open Innovation Challenge, a funding program supporting ideas addressing some of the biggest challenges of the pandemic. After receiving more than 800 submissions from across the health, science, and technology community in Canada, we're excited to help develop and implement 11 of those ideas. One looks at testing climate conditions on COVID-19 transmission through an aerosol chamber designed by a team of virologists and engineers. Another project uses real-time artificial intelligence to track, monitor, and predict symptoms among high-risk seniors. We've also assembled the Roche Data Science Coalition, a group of academic and private organizations with a common mission. This coalition addresses grassroots challenge identification, access to data, and the development of actionable insights related to the pandemic. Our collaborators include Self-Care Catalysts, Think Data Works, Amy, the Vector Institute, and experts in privacy. Over the last 8 weeks, we have secured 5 to 7 years worth of global partnerships and have developed over 100 artificial intelligence solutions, virtual dashboards, market reports, and an overall deeper partnership with stakeholders across the globe.
This pandemic has exacerbated many existing gaps in our healthcare system while showing the immense value the life sciences sector brings. Issues such as system capacity, lack of virtual care, and data fragmentation across the country are igniting a pressing demand for sustainable change. We have started to see incredible flexibility and leadership in our health system's immediate response to the pandemic. However, it's important to use learnings from this crisis to catalyze meaningful long-term change. As we shift the focus to recovery, there are great opportunities to accelerate innovation and move our country forward. The future of life sciences in Canada is extraordinarily bright. There are many actions the government can take to promote growth at home and abroad. First, the federal government should revive the Health and Biosciences Economic Strategy Table. The announcement of the Industry Strategy Council is a good start, but we encourage the government, with input from industry, patients, and other sector stakeholders, to revitalize this work to identify specific and measurable next steps. It's also important to acknowledge the need to rethink some of the recommendations in the context of the pandemic planning and building our capacity for the next potential crisis. Secondly, a strong data ecosystem is a key success factor in the response to COVID-19. The pandemic has exposed significant limitations in the ability to collect, access, integrate, share, and analyze high-quality data. It has also magnified concerns that data cannot be easily compared between jurisdictions, as each province uses different data collection methodologies, standards, and policies. Furthermore, most provincial data is publicly inaccessible and incomprehensive. We believe we can win this fight through the sharing of safe and secure healthcare data and knowledge, abiding by local privacy laws, to better inform patient care and healthcare system decision-making. Lastly, there needs to be an increase in investments with programs like Scale AI and the Digital Supercluster that Roche is very proud to be a part of. COVID-19 has demonstrated the catastrophic effect to both patient health and the economy as a result of a lack of constant innovation in our sector. By rewarding innovation, increasing investment into innovative technologies such as genomic sequencing, cloud computing, digital health tools for remote patient care and monitoring, as well as medicines that deliver superior outcomes, we stand to deliver unprecedented value in both health benefit for patients and economic growth for our country. These technologies will position Canada as a leader in personalized healthcare and allow us to provide patients with exactly what they need from their healthcare systems. Whether through diagnostics, medicines, or insights, Roche is a committed partner, helping to navigate and ultimately end the COVID-19 pandemic. The life sciences sector has the amazing potential to lead the economic recovery of this country. Healthy Canadians bring a healthy economy. And through collaboration with patients, patient organizations, companies like Roche, and the government, we can mobilize these ideas into action. Thank you very much for your time today. We are happy to address any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. And our next witness is Mr. Desjardins from Montreal Port Authority. You have the floor for 7 minutes.
Bonjour.
Hello. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you here. I'm Danielle Desjardins, Vice President Operations of the Montreal Port Authority. I would like to begin by sincerely thanking the port workers and people who navigate to the ports who've been working so hard since the beginning of this crisis to ensure that all activities within our sector are ongoing across the country and in all of our oceans. I would like to thank the government for all the efforts made to reduce the impact and the aftermath of this pandemic on Canadians. In particular, government officials and departments that we're in contact with, they've remained available and listened to us carefully over the last numbers of weeks. I would also like to thank our clients and our business partners who have maintained their confidence in us and their working relationships with us. Montreal's port is the second largest port of Canada and the sole container port on the St. Lawrence Seaway. And our markets are mostly Quebec, Ontario, and the American Midwest. A port is a hub for goods. All modes of transport come through here. Every year, 2,500 trucks come in to handle shipments. 2,000 ships per year enter our waters, and a number of trains come through the exchange areas to deliver goods. The activity in our port accounts for $2.6 billion in trade, and about 19,000 jobs depend on it. Last year, in 2019, over $100 billion in goods came over our wharves, and this was a record year for our port. In March 2020, though, this will be a historic month. The first quarter, we were growing with more activity than usual, but what took place in March was our ability to recognize how essential moving goods around the country via the ports is. We have had to quickly adapt our business model based on the health guidelines. COVID-19 has had an extraordinary effect on our economy and on our supply chains. For actors in the supply chain, what counts most is protecting our workers. So what's happened since the outset of this pandemic? We have had to develop winning approaches to face the disaster. That means a well-embedded risk management culture, a business plan, and a pandemic plan with a number of measures such as health measures, hand washing, and of course physical distancing, closing our offices, distributing equipment for individual protection. We have done pretty much everything that you've heard from others. The types of measures that Mr. Jean-Robert Lesage mentioned a little earlier today. But I must say that we've also been working a great deal on diversifying our markets, even before this crisis, in order to be ready to manage such a crisis and do well despite economic shocks. So from the very outset, the Montreal Port Authority shifted its employee management plans to deal with the crisis. We created a tactic on-the-ground group able to identify new measures and approaches and apply them quickly. The aim of behind creating these committees, really out among the employees, was to really encourage confidence and work closely with our employees to ensure group resilience. We needed to message, communicate well, and especially communicate well with our employees. Once we got mobilized and established our lines of communication, we also mobilized our managers and operators. We needed to support their activities and ensure fluidity and apply all the new guidelines. We have only one work stoppage to share with you here at the very outset when there was a good deal of confusion and everyone was looking for the right information. So that didn't happen again because we have clear messaging now and keep our employees at the very heart of our actions and reactions. That strategy has worked very well for us with employees and also the employees of our leaseholders. So beyond that, I want to underscore how we're working closely with the entire supply chain and logistics chains. Communicate, 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 respect the facts, and listen carefully. As of the very first days, the very first hours, we put our ear to the ground and listen carefully. The logistics chain was reoriented to avoid shortages, to manage storing areas with the M region cargo bins in Montreal. We ran a quick inventory of all available spaces. We wanted to ensure that Canadian exporters wouldn't be stuck, unable to export their goods. Result, the container traffic continued through our facility, and we remain 100% operational with no backlog. Beyond collaboration, when it comes to the logistics chain around the port, we operated on a national basis with the port authorities across Canada, ensuring that we identified best practices, shared them, and applied them. This was done in partnership with the Anvers port, with an association of ports who are very involved in innovating new logistics approaches. As well, we worked Scale AI, the digital hub with Ivado Labs that created a tool for us to help us identify goods, improve logistics chains to get goods through our facility, especially material that is essential to fighting COVID. So in conclusion, I can say that we have remained open. We must remain open, remain strategically available. We must continue to respond to the situation by establishing priorities, communicating well, and ensuring that our clients remain with us and confident. Thank you, Mr. Desjardins. I would just like to remind the witnesses that if you're a Francophone and you would like to hear the interpretation, do choose French, the French channel.
If you need translation services from French to English, please change the channel on your Zoom to English. And with that, we will start with our rounds of questions. And our first rounds of questions goes to MP Tracy Gray. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Association of Canada. With COVID-19, we're seeing, for obvious health and safety reasons, a spike in the use of single-use plastics, plastic bags, PPEs, and other items to stop the spread of the pandemic. With the encouraged use of these materials to stop the spread of the virus, and also with the added demand for food safety, Ms. Deschênes, do you think the government is correct in wanting to label plastics as toxic?
Thank you for the question, Ms. Gray. We have been advocating, we've been working very closely with the government and support the Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment and the federal government in their approach to managing plastic in the environment, in particular their approach for zero plastic waste. Our concern with the federal government's impending approach to regulate single-use plastics and plastic pollution in the environment is that they have indicated that they want to use CEPA, Canadian Environmental Protection Act, in particular the Schedule 1, which is a list of toxic substances. And we find that that is that would create confusion with consumers, particularly those who are wearing today, who are wearing face masks and are doing their takeout in plastic packaging. But more importantly, it creates it's that ambivalence that is a signal to the Canadian industry that the government is really not interested in investments in chemistry in the plastic sector. And certainly we agree that plastics in the environment don't belong there. They need to be managed, but we feel that there are other tools, including circular economy legislation, that would allow us to properly manage plastics and keep it in the economy.
Great, thank you. And now, have you seen in your conversations that you say you're having, have you seen any indication that the federal government might be changing their stance on the labeling of these products as toxic?
We are hoping so. We feel there's a tremendous opportunity with the CEPA review process, which should be getting underway either June or July this year. And there's an opportunity there to potentially bring about amendments in particular to the pollution prevention section that might be able to help the government sort of address their concerns while ensuring that toxic designation isn't used, and that would be incredibly helpful.
Okay, thank you. If plastics are labeled as toxic under the Canada Environment Protection Act, how much of a hit to the industry would this cause, in your opinion?
Well, we're looking at the two investments that are currently being made in Alberta and Ontario are polypropylene investments. We're also looking at CKPC, Canada Kuwait Petrochemical Organization in Pembina. They have received supports and have deferred their $4 billion investment in Alberta until after the COVID crisis. That is a propane to polypropylene investment. And these two, Interpipelines and CKPCs, are the first such investments in Canada, and polypropylene is a critical component of personal protective equipment, N95 masks, gowns, etc. So given that investment that construction has not yet begun, that is at significant risk, as are the future $11 billion in investments that have been earmarked for Alberta and Ontario.
What would be the barriers? Like, what are currently the barriers that are in place? Other than this, COVID-19, where we have this time where things are sort of on hold. But on the bigger picture, what are the barriers that are in place right now preventing these kinds of investments in Alberta and in Canada?
Well, the biggest ones really are around, investment supports. So if we're looking at, one of the things that's really critical to understand is that we're using feedstocks from Canadian natural gas and natural gas liquids that can bring about greenhouse gas emissions reductions and intensity up to 60% in some cases compared to other products worldwide. So things like a permanent accelerated capital allowance would be very helpful, particularly as we see this current round wrapping up and CKPC is going to just start thinking about breaking ground next year, and those supports won't be available. So ACCA, making that permanent would be incredibly helpful for us.
Thank you. We've just got time for one more quick question here. I've read reports that investments in the United States for new projects in your industry can be as high as $300 billion. And that represents a huge amount of economic activity and good paying jobs. Would you say that Canada is getting our fair share of new products relative to the size of what our opportunities are here?
We usually run about 10% of investment linked to US. We've been tracking much less than that, but again, we do have a potential for another $20 billion in investment and are hoping that with the right supports in place, good sound policy, we'll be able to get there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next round of questions goes to MP Jahari. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses. It was quite informative. Let me start by asking the Chemistry Industry Association of Canada, Madame Desjardins. You mentioned the 3 R's. You mentioned resilience, responsiveness, and recovery. And in resilience, under resilience heading, you talked about the no impact or minimal impact and no economic incentive was needed for your industry. And under responsiveness, you specifically talked about the rapid response platform. And on the recovery, you talked about the $11 billion investment that's planned to come in 2021 and 2022. Let me start with the no impact and resilience. Was it a quick shift in the industry that helped minimize or eliminate the impact? Or was it just the nature of the industry that it was well suited for, helping this pandemic?
It's a great question, and thank you for that. It's a little bit of both. I mean, we've, if you think back to 9/11 and the 2008 financial crisis, chemistry sector had weathered those fairly well, primarily because 95% of the manufactured products globally include chemistry solutions in them. They're made up of chemical compounds and solutions. In this particular case, those sectors that did see a reduction in production, primarily because they were their chemicals destined to mining, forestry, the automotive sector. And so we saw some significant declines in those sectors as a result of COVID. And there are also some, more economic outliers there too. Those that those that did increase production did so because they were focused on the disinfectants, the chlorines, the bleaches, etc.
So we had some downturn and we have some up in nature. Okay.
Yeah,
can you expand a little bit of time on rapid response platform that you develop as part of your responsiveness?
Yeah, it's an excellent platform. It was spearheaded by BASF Canada and TriMac, and it builds on a platform that had been in place to link people who had goods to transport with trucks and transportation, sort of a dating network. And in this particular case, we were able to, BASF and TriMac were able to modify it so that we could actually make it available to a broad spectrum. So we've shared it as broadly as we could, including through the industry department. And what it does is it will, if you have a need for masks or gowns or face shields, you input those needs in, and the algorithms will set you up with the closest supplier near you. And so it's been running for 3 weeks. It's been incredibly effective.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to quickly switch to La Roche. Mr. Karagata, you mentioned antibody testing, and you said that you're hoping to get approval on that. Can you expand on the type of testing and how different antibody testing is from the other type of tests that's being investigated or being researched?
Yeah, maybe my colleague Fanny can expand a little bit as well, given her background. But the first test that was approved was a molecular test, and these have been the tests that have been used throughout the COVID pandemic. The serology test is more focused on determining whether folks have had the disease in the past, right, and not knowing it. For example, as a younger person, perhaps I had it earlier. I went to the Dominican Republic prior to coming back home and then the pandemic occurred, right? So perhaps I had it. So that's the type of test that this serology test would be used for on people like myself, and it would be a great use for folks who work in the healthcare system, for folks who are teachers, things like that, to check and see if they've had COVID in the past.
So that will definitely help the frontline
that's
workers.
the primary.
Yeah. Okay, great. Now let's go quickly to Madam Shi. You talked about 3 gaps: system capacity and also data fragmentation. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to get the second one, but really I want to focus on the data fragmentation. You talked about the data ecosystem, collect, assess, analyze, and share. As it relates to the testing, I think access to these information and participation of those is a key question, as the rate of adoption of these various application is being questioned. I only got about 45 seconds. Can you expand on that piece of how how important that is in helping complete the circle around data fragmentation?
So I completely agree with you. I think testing data is important because it gives us a pulse on who actually has or is a confirmed case versus who potentially has immunity. But there's also looking at epidemiological evidence where you can actually not particularly test an individual, but you can look at population risk patterns to determine the probability of somebody having that particular, having COVID. So the combination of those types of data together can breed a really nice emergence strategy or something that we could use for pandemic planning. So I completely agree with you, but there's a much larger picture to take into account, and that fragmentation is not helping.
Thank you very much. Notre prochain tour.
The next round is for Mr. Lemire. You have 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So to begin, my questions will be for Mr. Dagenet. So first of all, I would like to underscore the fact that the crisis with COVID-19 has shown that the Montreal port infrastructure was able to do the work. There's this culture of resilience that you mentioned earlier. I would like to hear you talk a little bit about the impacts or the adaptation mechanisms you resorted to, especially digitally. Did that make a difference for you in the success that you have experienced over the last few months? Thank you for the question. Yes, indeed. Among the various pillars that we used to establish our strategy, resiliency was a sure thing. It was one of the values that I referred to earlier. We have business culture. Innovation is at the heart of the way in which we work as well. At the Port Authority, our partners are very up-to-date with regard to the initiatives we've put forward over the last few years. I would say that more recently, we launched a new initiative. Its aim being to decode the customs reports. Unfortunately, the sound is cutting out. So we're using artificial intelligence so as to better identify the shipments under the COVID situation with our partners. We are looking at all of the elements needed in order to finalize a communication plan. The aim here is to share a flow of information between all of the elements of the logistical chain so that people reach the good decisions so that we don't miss out on drugs, inputs, for example, plastics required for personal protection equipment. We want people to be able to come to the right decisions to obtain this equipment and grant this equipment preferential treatment. With regard to shipment movements, in the same way, we want to take care of our staff, and all sorts of measures are going to be put in place very shortly. We're going to be using proximity bracelets as reminders to staff that they're getting too close to someone so that they are encouraged to respect the 2-meter distancing so as to ensure that they respect all of the sanitary rules. We don't want to let our guard down, and we want to maintain the safety and security of our staff. My next question is for Mr. Lessa from the Groupe Robert. We see the massive investments you've made for digital services to better protect your supply chain. There's been a positive impact with regard to the workload that you experienced during the pandemic. Could you tell us more about this, please? In fact, at the very outset, for us, we were very fearful. With more than 1,500 drivers traveling between Canada and the U.S., we were worried. We didn't know how we would be able to control and keep tabs on all of our employees. And these are measures that were effective at the very outset because we didn't waste any time. We sought out the information we needed, and in the very first 2 days, we started taking people's temperature, and putting in place physical distancing, and you will understand that this isn't easy to do. You've got the trucker who comes to the plant, to the warehouse or the distribution center, same thing. We were very involved, and we're even more involved now with regard to food and supplies, medical supplies, and the demand indeed was very strong, very high. And as odd as this might seem to you, we had to put in place security measures to follow up on our shipments with the containers, because there were products that were being targeted by people who wanted to make a profit, seize upon this equipment and sell it for a profit on the market. So if you're shipping masks, well, this was a well-known fact. Same thing when we unloaded the cargo of the famous Russian plane. The TV cameras were there, etc., and people were taking picture snapshots of the containers. And obviously, these containers were destined for very specific locations. So this required security measures. What perhaps disappointed us was to know that in the supply chain, there were situations that were really oddities. We hadn't, for example, thought of giving people involved in the supply chain the inventory numbers. So we were faced with mask shortages because several million masks were out of date. So perhaps a word of advice that I could relay to the various levels of government, it would be to ensure that you deal with specialized companies involved in logistics that are able to do the follow-up with all of these stocks and inventories, products that are out of date after a certain deadline, etc. Sorry, that's all the time we have for this round of questions. The next round.
Say you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for our witnesses for being here. My first set of questions would be for the Chemical Industry Association. In the presentation, you mentioned that the Schedule 1 is creating confusion. Maybe to expand on that, I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about this confusion that you've identified.
Sure. I mean, the plastics haven't been listed there yet, but the CEPA Schedule 1 is really a list of, it's titled List of Toxic Substances. So if something is applied there, be it, there are tons of substances, over 3,000 that are listed there, including zinc and CO2 and a number of substances. It means that they're once it's listed, it requires a management process. We feel that, plastics are not toxic. If they are in the environment, they don't belong there. And that's what the issue is. Our firm belief is that we need a way to manage plastics to keep them out of the environment and create a circular economy so that we can reuse them over and over and over again. Listing them as toxic, the confusion it creates is that if you're about to hand your child a Lego, that Lego is made of plastic. Are you going to be comfortable in handing that child something that has been designated as toxic?
Yeah, well, we used to have asbestos in our crayons. And so it's not unusual that we have, different, chemicals in there. And my car has chemicals and so forth. So are you disputing the science about the toxicity of it? Is that what I'm are you saying scientifically it doesn't belong on this list? I mean, I'm not sure, or are you saying that consumers or the general public are confused? Like, who is confused?
The science hasn't been done yet. The science is still very much in flux. the federal government would need to do a risk assessment to determine what the impacts are. A draft science assessment was conducted by Health Canada and Environment Canada. It was primarily a review of the state of science, and it identified the fact that plastics are problematic in the environment, but there were no material impacts at this point because the science is just not available yet in terms of human health, that more work needed to be done there. Confusion is if you've got campaign organizations that say plastics are toxic and sharing that information with the public is plastics are ubiquitous. Your headset is made of plastic. There are plastics in your clothing. It becomes a problem in terms of trying to ensure that consumers are comfortable with products.
Yeah, but I guess the thing is, and this is where so you're saying then your position then is that consumers and the general public are confused about the level of health effects of eating plastics or wearing plastics. Is that the position then?
No, that's not the position. It is.
That's
the products the products haven't been listed yet. We're asking for the federal government to choose an alternative method to manage the plastics. If you declare polypropylene, for instance, as toxic, well, that becomes problematic because the face mask that you're wearing or the face shield that you're wearing is would then be deemed toxic. And
right, but
that's where the confusion lies.
But I don't think it's that confused. Like I worked quite long on on microplastics. Mm-hmm. and it was my legislation, that went through the House with regards to it. And I think my experience is people understand the difference of having, plastic microbeads in their toothpaste, which they're now swallowing, and it's in the food chain, versus out of putting on this plastic, you're right, headset that I have right now. I don't think that they are naive about the differences of those two different things. So I'm trying to figure out who is confused and on what issue. That's what your position is, that there's confusion with it's going to create or has created. But I don't think the public is confused. I don't think retailers and others and packaging people are confused that there's a different, consequence of how the product is used. Mm-hmm. So,
that's a fair point.
Who again is confused? I don't quite understand who's confused.
No, that's a fair point. Our position is that these are not toxic, but they need to be managed, right? They can't be in the environment. Microplastics in particular, they degrade or deteriorate, and they should not be in the environment. There are a number of other tools that we can implement, including circular economy legislation that will allow us to incent the development of advanced recycling technologies, to help with product design, to create polymers down the road that are much that have fewer additives in them and are safe and the like. So for us, it's just it's that juxtaposition where you're saying a plastic is toxic, but everyone is using it, and that's what creates that confusion.
Yeah, and I guess it just reminds me of when I was on city council and before this, pushed for the elimination of spraying chemicals unnecessarily, and we heard from the industry that couldn't be done for different reasons. So anyway, my time's up. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Massey. And we now move to the second round of questions. First MP is MP Dreeshen. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and it's welcome to everyone for being here this afternoon. And I too would like to speak to the Chemistry Association of Canada. When I look about 10 miles north of where I am, I see Joffrey. So there's a place where the petrochemical industry that we have in Alberta is really so critical. Plastics, the use of it. I was in China a couple of years ago on a trade mission and every place that you would go in order to make sure that there was food safety and security. Corns of cob would have a plastic wrapping on it. So when we speak of single-use plastics, I think we've seen it in our grocery stores as everyone is saying, look, there's not going to be a charge on these things anymore. We want you to use that rather than to bring in potentially contaminated fiber or fabric types of bags. So I mean, there's so many things like that are out there. You mentioned, Ms. Deschênes, that there's barriers for investment, and I think really that's a critical part, because it seems lost in this discussion of Canada's natural resources and the significance of them, that no one looks at the 60% greenhouse gas reduction that you're speaking of. No one looks at that as far as agriculture is concerned, recognizing how much better Canada is than other places around the world. Yet we do this signaling that we're going to stop this or we're going to stop that. I think of neonicotinoids and so on, that there's this great push to take them away because they're going to kill bees. Well, quite frankly, that's where the canola fields are, where the beekeepers are taking their bees so that they have healthy opportunities to grow their product. So I'm really concerned about the way in which the industry is being portrayed, and it seems as though we can't get through to people just how significant it is and how the money that can be made from our industries can go towards cleaning up plastics in the oceans and all these types of things if we would just unleash the power that we have in our industry. So I want to ask a question about some of those barriers or some of the things that are making us uncompetitive. One of them, of course, has to do, with our carbon tax, where it is right now, what it is going to be in the near future. We are trying to compete with companies around the world. If we shut down our industry, it will be filled in from other places around the world. So I'm curious what you feel the impacts of us over-regulating and not making ourselves a world global player is going to do for our industry.
I think one of the things, and thank you for the question, I think one of the important things to keep in mind is that we are a natural resources country. And one of the things that we forget is that our natural resources are actually among the lowest in terms of greenhouse gas emissions through the manufacturing cycle than other jurisdictions. Why? Because we have more electricity, hydroelectricity than any other jurisdiction. We use natural gas, which in order to displace coal and other inputs. And so it's really important to keep that in mind. What it means is that for our industry, we do have a lower greenhouse gas intensity footprint than many other jurisdictions. Then it means that the products that we produce are already on a life cycle basis better for the environment than something coming out of China and even sections of Europe. Some of the barriers that we do find are we support carbon tax. We support the idea of putting a price on pollution. The government's new clean fuel standard, a great opportunity to address transportation fuels. Our concern with the clean fuel standard is that on gaseous or industrial fuels, it means that we'll be paying twice for the same molecules. And so understanding that we're emissions intensive, we're trade exposed, we're more than happy to pay our part in terms of carbon pricing. We just don't want to pay twice for the same molecule that we're working with.
Okay, so, and I know my time is just about up, but of course you are in an industry where you can pass the costs of a carbon price on to consumers, correct?
No, we can't. We're a trade exposed sector. We primarily export.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next round of questions goes to MB Lambropoulos. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to begin by thanking all of the witnesses for being with us today. So Before I begin my questions, I just wanted to mention to the committee that at 12:55 today, the clerk sent out my notice of motion to all MPs in this committee in order to basically say that I'd like for us to discuss a draft report on June 22nd, a day which has already been set aside for committee business, and that I don't want to discuss this any further today, but that we can discuss it further on a committee business day so as to not take any further time from the witnesses. So I'll continue on with my questions. Ma première question est pour le port de Montréal. Alors, Monsieur Dagenet.
My first question is for the Port of Montreal, Port Authority. Mr. Dagenet, Montreal's Port Authority is the largest port authority in eastern Quebec, an ecosystem of 3,000 and some companies and 19,000 jobs, as you mentioned. Could you tell us how much transportation has been reduced and how many jobs have been lost because of the current situation in the Montreal Port Authority since the outset of the pandemic then? Thank you for your question. All right. The first quarter, the first 3 months of 2020, we did very well. As of mid-April, though, and certainly by the month of May, we were feeling the slowdown, the downturn. And now we can see this on a daily basis. There is less activity on the ships and less activity on the trains as well. So we anticipate a 12% drop in revenues for 2020. We must self-fund, so losing 12% of our yield has required us to immediately reorganize upkeep and business processes to ensure that our costs balance out for treasury purposes and liquidities. We haven't had to put anyone out of work, though. We haven't laid anyone off. Administration, though, is now working from home, teleworking. I would say about half or 3/4 of them are out in the field, though, working at the port and trucking, trains, and so on, and safety concerns. Thank you very much. Do you have any specific recommendations for the federal government? How could we help?
A better place. Quelles mesures pourraient être mises en place pour aider avec le...
What measures could we foresee applying or offering to the Montreal Port Authority? Thanks again. I would say that volume reduction has had a real effect on our yield and our income, basically, such that we've had to adjust our operations. All that is just being pushed down the line, really. Any sort of assistance or relief helps us to continue to invest and to contribute to the economic recovery. Construction activities, for example, as you know, our capital investments are $1.2 million for the upcoming 2 years, including record growth in the terminal area of our port. So any relief, any direct assistance, credit assistance to ensure our infrastructure survives and that we're able to capitalize on it in the future would be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry.
33 seconds.
33 seconds. Not very much time for another question and answer, so I will let go of the rest of my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our next round of questions goes to MP Patzer. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I'll just start with the Group Robert. Has your group seen that almost 2 months ago, the Canadian Federation of Agriculture warned that a lack of financial stability and labor for farming could lead to gaps or breaks in our food system? Do you share their sense of urgency when it comes to maintaining domestic food supply as a shipping company?
Yes, of course. We are, I would say, most 45% of our volume is related to the food industry. So we keep a very close eye, on the new market, is coming out after the COVID, and we see also, a lot of problem with the distribution. We have 32 distribution centers related to which are related to the food industry, and we have a lot of capacity. But the problem is to get access in the big cities. As you well aware, they close certain street and certain area for the trucking. So we would like to deliver, the food, but with the big trailer, it would be mostly impossible. And that would have, for sure, a real effect on the cost of the food, because if we have to bring back our, let's say, trailers to distribution center and put it in a small truck, so if you look at all the cost of it, it will have an impact, and for sure. And any new regulation by the government to, I would say, put on imports have to be very well explained, because with all the agreements you could see, let's say, like the one between Canada and Europe, ship, I would say, 80% of their product, export product to Canada, and Canada send back only for about 20% of the value. So we are losing on that. We're not complaining, because we do a lot of transportation to the port of Montreal. But in fairness for the food industry in Canada, especially if you contact the Group Export in Montreal, they will give you all these stats about, how it's work, and Canada has to put the pressure, on the food export to compare to the import of Europe product.
Okay, and do you think that media reports and government announcements have communicated to the crucial importance of Canadian agri-food and its challenges to the public?
Yes, for sure. And I believe in the agri-food, because I'm sitting on the board of Group Espoir in Montreal. And, one of the problem is the Group Espoir was very well organized to go to all kinds of exhibition across the world. And now it's all, I would say, governed by the federal, and that's great a problem, because a lot of the I would say companies are very unhappy about that situation. I think we should have a second look on it, how agri-foods works with the provinces. Some provinces are not well organized, but others, like the one in Quebec, is very well organized. We participate to the CIAL and in Montreal and in Toronto, and we talk to the exhibitors, and they worry about the future, not having the Groupe Export Agroalimentaire not involved in it.
So has enough been done to secure our food supply chains then here in Canada, do you think?
Oh yes. We're getting more and more organized, and technically, with the systems in place, we have, I would say, lots of good control on the regarding all types of foods. Talking like yogurt, or talking vegetables, or any other product. We have to maintain the quality, through the system of the trucking and the distribution centers, and having the customers secure about that. So that's could be the most important thing. Regarding the organization, we have no problem.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lessard. Our next round of questions goes to MP Erskine Smith. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thanks very much. I just had very quickly with the Chemical Industry Association, I took it you weren't disputing the harm that plastics have on the environment. You were questioning the science as it relates to toxicity for humans. Is that right?
Not necessarily, no. So the draft science assessment that was conducted by Health Canada and Environment Canada was very clear. They reviewed health impacts and environmental impacts. It was a lot easier with the science available to them to really make strong links to some of the impacts on the environment, particularly endangering wildlife. For the health impacts, they noted that more research needed to be done, that there just wasn't enough information available there to make assessments.
Right. No, I took that. I think that's. I thought that was the intention of my question, to say that the evidence that was clear in relation to the environment. I guess the part that I'm struggling to understand as we have this conversation is, do you agree though that single-use plastics that are harmful for the environment should be prohibited?
You know, I represent the plastics industry, so to say that we support a ban on single-use plastics is not something
even if they're unnecessary and they're harmful for the environment.
What we do support is the opportunity. What we support is the CCME Zero Plastic Waste Strategy. We support enhanced infrastructure for collection. We don't support plastics, the fact that plastics are in the environment. They're far too valuable to be in the environment, frankly. They provide incredible inputs into new products. So through either
whoa. So, but we're not talking about. I'm not talking about plastics writ large here. When I talk about single-use unnecessary plastics, the plastic bag that I shouldn't really have in my house and that I collect from the grocery store en masse, surely you're not saying that has a significant positive contribution and into our economy. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it supports thousands of jobs here in Canada, but the most important thing is that it doesn't belong in the environment. So we need to put systems in place to ensure that it doesn't leak into the environment.
One of which may be a prohibition.
One of which may be a prohibition.
Thanks very much. So my other questions for Logan and Rosh. So serology testing is critical as we move forward, and we've seen correct me if I'm wrong, it's the Alexis SARS-CoV-2, and it is approved in the EU, approved in the US, approved in the UK. Is there availability in these jurisdictions today?
Yes, they're available in those jurisdictions, yeah.
And the accuracy, remind me?
I don't have the exact numbers, Nathaniel. I can check for that and get that to the committee.
I had 99.8%. So I mean, if it's something otherwise, I would like to know.
Yeah.
And is it available in Canada?
So we're waiting on the license from Health Canada. So we submitted about 3 weeks ago. We've seen in other jurisdictions it's typically taken about a month. So we suspect we will hopefully get it sooner rather than later. So
you haven't seen processes in Canada be particularly slow in comparison to other countries?
No, I think so what we saw with the molecular test, things moved very, very quickly, right? That one was approved on March 16th and was very fast. These ones with the serology test, there's been a little bit more of a delay. So, and I wouldn't say a delay, I think they're doing their due diligence on these ones. So it's nothing unusual that we've seen in Canada versus other jurisdictions at this point.
Do you foresee any supply chain challenges with ensuring that there is great availability of these serology tests?
We don't foresee any supply chain challenges with the serology tests at this time.
And Fanny, you've spoken about the importance of data, and can you speak a little bit, if you were to grade Canada and provinces sharing data, what grade would we have to date dealing with the greatest threat to health in my lifetime?
If I were to do a scale of 1 to 10, I would love to say that we were on the upper edge of that, but unfortunately, I have to be honest, so I'll say a 6.
Okay, so barely passing grade. And so to fix the data sharing, which is critical, you talked about surveillance testing, strategic testing, data is critical for doing that. BC has been successful because of that, not just the capacity to test, but also to test smartly. What are your recommendations for improving the use of data with respect to testing and tracing?
So I think as I alluded in my initial comment, that I think that it's important to do a combination of both. Like, it'd be nice if we could test every single person every single day, but that's not going to happen, right? So it's like taking what we can from our capacity and then complementing it with data, and doing that in an intelligent way as we gradually open up the market. So we open up to one level and then we do a monitoring or a testing. We open up to the next level and then we monitor. So that level of combination analysis would be optimal in my eyes.
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. And notre prochain tour.
Our next turn goes to MP Savard Tremblay. You have the floor for 2.5 minutes. Hello. My question is for the Montreal Port Authority representative. We know that for every dollar invested in the Port of Montreal, it helps everyone in the supply chain and it helps to have more efficient trade. So how is the money that is in the National Fund for trade routes and for federal programs for science and technology could impact the supply chain in Quebec? Thank you for your question. Yes, I can't hear you very well. The sound is very low, but overall I can hear. You can hear me now? Yes, it's much better now. What I was saying is that the Port of Montreal, well, it looks like my image froze. I was saying that the National Trade Fund and the National Trade Routes do have projects that they've funded. We've had projects for the port itself. There was also Scale AI. So we were talking about innovation and the supercluster in innovation and artificial intelligence. In both cases, the Port of Montreal created projects. One of the projects is the fast lane, so the quick identification of goods that are essential. In fast lane, we have another project to better coordinate and to make better decisions in logistics chains. That means putting things together and digitizing trade routes for goods. So 25 days before goods arrive in Canada, there would be a planned chain and our logistics would be adapted to that, to where they're going. We also know that we are at the whims of the weather, and we know that with variability, we could use these tools to help us navigate, and it would help us to make better decisions. Finally, for trade routes, we have projects to improve infrastructures. There is the intermodal project that we've also funded some, and we've also funded some projects for containers. Thank you. Maybe it's better when I talk faster. I can see the red, I can see the red piece of cardboard. Thank you very much.
Goes to MP Massey. You have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regards to the Montreal Port, just with an interest in terms of the lake levels being high here in the southern part, just curious as to how it's affecting operations in your area and whether or not there's been increased complications because of the COVID to manage that. We have a lot of work that needs to be done on docks and a number of different areas even prior to this. So I'm just kind of curious of what's happening in your region.
Merci pour votre question, député.
Thank you for your question. We have infrastructure projects for our docks. the high levels of water complicate the work that we have to do underwater, and some of these projects were suspended in the first phase of the COVID response. The work was stopped between March and April, and that delayed the spring projects. The projects that we had are 100% operational, and we're now trying to make up for lost time. So we are going to deliver our projects. As for the high water levels, people use the full water column that they have access to, and they're using it to the maximum, to the fullest.
Do you have any projects that have partnerships with infrastructure programs? And we've faced this in the past where some of those programs' deadlines needed extension or couldn't get extended, and it ran over into complications to completing them. I'm wondering whether you have any of those challenges. That's one of the things I worry about with some of the infrastructure programs that might be rolled out with municipalities, provinces, and the federal government, is the date and time. And in the past, we've had some building programs. They've run into problems later on because they couldn't procure the proper equipment even, and then the contracting. I'm just curious if you're running into that now. You may not be, but.
Yes, actually this week we actually had a conference call. I don't know whether you were made aware or not, but
no.
We actually had a conference call with Infrastructure Canada exactly about that. A project that has not yet started, that will now be delayed somewhat, and we've somewhat lost this the opportunity of this entire construction season. Often jokingly, we say Canada is a country of two seasons, winter and construction. And this spring, this delay has brought upon some insecurity on some of our vendors and some of our suppliers, and they can't really guarantee whether they can start their work this year. So we've asked for a postponement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Desjardins. We now move to the third round of questions, and our first round of questions goes to MP Rempel-Garner. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm actually just going to pick up on a line of questions started by my colleague, Mr. Erskine Smith. And I am interested in the concept of unnecessary versus necessary plastics. And I think that's actually a good way of framing out this debate, because in the context of the pandemic, prior to the pandemic, there was a lot of discussion about like, okay, well, we don't need single-use straws. We don't need single-use plastic bags. They're unnecessary. In the context of human health, right? Like the calculation was made, human health, environmental health it's a detriment to have these products. But then when the pandemic hit, we had opposite advice from public health officials basically saying, okay, don't bring your reusable plastic bags to the grocery store, use single-use plastics because of the potential impact on human health. And I guess looking at Ms. Deschênes, I'm just wondering if you can speak to the industry's perspective on this. So if you're arguing that the approach is not to list plastics as a toxic substance under Schedule 1 of CEPA, then how can we deal with that trade-off, right? So that we know plastics are ubiquitous. We know that they're used in everything in everyday life, but how do we as legislators mitigate that that trade-off that we're always talking about, such that people who are concerned about the floating garbage plastic icebergs off of the coast of Indonesia are their fears are dealt with. My colleague Mr. Massey, I'm also concerned about microbeads in our Great Lakes. Like I don't want those in my digestive tract. So how do we square that circle? How do we, and how is the industry association going to lead on that issue so that regs aren't just happening to it, but that they're an active partner in this discussion?
Yeah, and it's a great question, and you're right. There, prior to the pandemic, there was that call for unnecessary plastics. What we've found is that in certain circumstances, plastics can perform better than other materials. I think our approach is that if you are seeking alternatives, then look at them from a life cycle basis. You don't want to pick an alternative that down the road will have more impacts on the environment. So you really need to take a life cycle approach to that. And to an earlier point around science, it's really important for that. What we're looking at and what we've been advocating with the provinces and with the federal government is really not too far out of line with the CCME action plan on zero plastic waste. It's really putting pieces in place that will allow us to allows the producers the ability to implement extended producer responsibility. That means that they're responsible for the plastics they put on the market and are pay the costs of collecting them back. We see this work very well in British Columbia. 70% of their plastics are recovered, compared to much lower numbers across the country. Ontario is starting a blue box modernization program that will see it move to extended producer responsibility. We also look at investment supports around advanced recycling that allows for chemical recycling and will allow us to take those hard to recycle products like razors and stir sticks and cutlery and really transform them, bring them back down to their molecular level, transform them, and then they can be used to create a whole new set of products.
Sure. I mean, like one of the things that this would be more of a municipal issue, I think, in many jurisdictions in Canada is that a lot of the recycling plastics can't be used as feedstock for different products. Or we hear about like plastics being collected and then shipped overseas and being put in garbage dumps in other countries. Like how is the industry working to ensure that if recycling is going to be the option, that it actually is used in feedstock in a broader scenario?
Well, we're recycling is one option. Mechanical recycling, advanced chemical recycling. What we're doing,
like, because I mean, like, look, one of the things that I often get is like, okay, well, we don't need plastic straws, but your industry association will say, like, well, we do need plastic straws, but people will say, well, we can't recycle it, or recycling doesn't get into the industry, right? So how does the industry deal with, rather than just pushing against regs, like saying we need to be part of the solution here and using it as feedstock? Sorry, Madam Chair.
Very quickly, I'll let you answer that.
Okay, we're working with key partners to try to build markets. So build markets that allow us to use those products, those recycled products, in roofing tiles, in in outdoor furniture, in a number of applications that will allow us to actually, if you build the market, then it's easier to collect the content, and you can set the recycled content standards, and we can adhere to that.
Thank you very much. Our next round of questions goes to MP Longfield. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I'm just going to continue on briefly with Ms. Deschênes, because this is a very good conversation and discussion that we're having. Particularly interesting for me is when you're mentioning life cycle and circular economy, something that my community is quite involved with, food circular economy, and how do we get the most life out of a molecule once it's been processed? I know polypropylene is harder than others. We do have capital cost allowances, high capital cost reductions on, or accelerated allowances for machinery and equipment that helps with the environment. What role has any of that played in terms of the responsible care program that CIIC is working on, in terms of looking for solutions to keep things out of landfill?
Well, our members are a very innovative lot. I mean, they're scientists, chemists. It's really important for them to really help deliver solutions. A lot of the things that they're working on right now are product design. How can you design the products for recyclability? How can you design them in a way that uses less of those products? We're also working, we also have members that are advanced recyclers, companies like Pyrowave, Green Mantra, Polystyrene. They take those products that don't necessarily need to be cleaned, and it provides a different stream from your traditional recycling blue box stream.
Right. Thank you. And Hematite in Guelph is another company that's taking some scrap from the Magna operation and turning it into plastic for speaker boxes, and they're sharing technology, actually even sharing molds, in order that one company's waste becomes the input for another company. So exactly. I think as we set up the CEPA Schedule 1 and the other regulations to really put the pressure on innovation is really where we need to head. And I appreciate the definition of toxicity. It has to be something that's looked at, which is really a definition that's within regulations versus the ECCC work. But thank you. I think we are more or less heading in the same direction to try and keep this expensive product out of landfills, which is terrible for the environment.
Well, that's just it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. C, I'd like to switch over to data. I love data.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah, it's just one of those things, right? If you either you love it or you hate it. But when you look at the Data Science Coalition, or I'm looking at manufacturing plants and high numbers of employees going into certain situations, maybe even office towers, people going into office towers, and how we aggregate data to do proper contact tracing. How are we working with manufacturers and supply chains to more adequately share the information? You mentioned some gaps and fragmentation. Is there a solution that you're working on with government and industry?
Yeah, so I would say that the Data Science Coalition is such a unique sight into the future. It's like we decided to go 10 years into the future because all of a sudden, all these multi-industry organizations, whether they were startups or multinationals, were like, we're all one company. We're all going to make sure that we're mission and mandate focused. We're going to get rid of the pandemic. So it was like, okay, we started to share resources. We started to share data. And then all of a sudden, there was this like expediting of digital solutions that could be used for the pandemic. And we're using our channels to try and mobilize that information as fast as possible. So it's like it started with a little critical mass, but I see it expanding outside of the typical players.
Well, the Mozilla Corporation has a saying that you work openly and you share data, you share information, and you get better solutions. How does this fit within an IP structure, which is kind of contra to that?
So I think, so when we think about open data, the benefit of looking at open data is to see the actual benefits of data, so you can prove that it actually works. But then there's that, what do we compete on and what do we not compete on? So I think in future, there's going to be this industry coalition or decision or table where we say, okay, well, no one's getting into the market right now. So let's decide that we're going to not compete in this area, but then we'll compete in this area. And I see that working. Yeah.
And in the meantime, saving lives. Why not?
Absolutely.
With data. Go figure.
I know.
Thank you so much. The card's coming up. Thank you.
You know me well, MP Longfield. So the next round of questions goes to MP Gray. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few questions for Group Robert Incorporated. So a few weeks ago, we heard from Western Canadian Shippers Coalition actually at this committee. And one of the concerns that they raised was around shipper container shortages potentially happening. And I know that you mentioned in your opening remarks that so far things have been managed from your side, reasonably well, and you've been tracking everything. But they were sort of talking, coming down the line, and a concern of theirs that they saw what was coming. Is that a concern of yours as well? Do you sort of see that in your company and within your industry there?
Yeah, well, at the beginning of the COVID, we had, I would say, worries about it, but we working very closely with the Port of Montreal, and we, as a group, because I'm on the board of Cargo M, who's is looking at all the transportation and logistics, we made, I would say, a kind of sondage to exactly know, how much space is available for containers, empty containers, to make sure to have a good inventory. We talked to the customers also in order to deliver the full containers in order to give us some empty containers. So in fact, all in the group of transportation companies working with the Port of Montreal were successful. And we managed to get across that problem within about 2 weeks. So it was a good realization. And it relieved the pressure on the companies like us and also on the customers because they were worried because some were still exporting, and to export you need the empty box. So okay. No, it went very well.
Thank you. Thank you. The other question I have has to do with the standardization or the lack of standardization with interprovincial trucking rules. And I hear this quite often. And what are some of the biggest challenges that Robert has had around this with transporting goods between provinces?
Between provinces, we didn't have too many problems because at the beginning, many truck stops were stopped, and our drivers were not in a position to have a shower, get foods, and things like this. But with the pressure and of the Quebec Association and the Canadian Trucking Association, we had, I would say, a good communication with these people, and finally, within could be 2 weeks, okay, things were in place for I would say transportation going stateside. It was another big item because most of the places were closed, and we had problems for our drivers because so we had to put in place, okay, where we had terminals to have showers and other supply from some food to the drivers, just to make sure they could continue, to do their work. So it was I would say, a tough process, but we took charge.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. When we look at what's called the government's regulatory reconciliation table, and this has to do with interprovincial trade specifically, I've noticed some of the changes being targeted to be resolved actually this year in the transport industry include standardization for regulations on electronic logging devices, size and weight restrictions, as well as commercial truck driver certifications. Would getting some of these regulations standardized have a meaningful impact for your company or for getting goods across the country?
Oh, it's very important because, we could compete at the same level because with having different rules in different provinces, sometimes, it was difficult to, let's say, establish our costing. But now more like the hours of work and driving, the control, electronic control. It took a while to get that in place, but now that means we could compete at the same level because with some others, were I would say using regular logbooks, and they had 3 logbooks on board. But now with the electronic, it's quite difficult, and it's good also, for the safety aspect of the transportation because it's all in our systems, and the dispatchers could control the numbers of hours of the drivers and put them to rest, if they need to, So.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Lessard. Merci beaucoup. Our next.
Thank you very much, Monsieur Lessard.
MP Isasi, you have the floor for 5 minutes. MP Isasi, you're still on mute.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much to all of the witnesses who have appeared before this committee. I should in turn apologize because I was experiencing technical glimpse. So there were many aspects of the testimony I missed, but eternally grateful for all the guidance that you have each provided. Now, for my first question, if I may, I'd like to follow up on what Madam Ram said, and my question is to the chemical industry. She rightly stated that you can't just push against regs. The reality is that there are many shortcomings in our as things currently stand. And as I understand it, the witness for the chemical industry rightfully has pointed out, much as my colleague MP Longfeld has stated, that it's all about innovation. It's about making sure that we're responsive and we're moving forward. However, the question and the challenge remains: how are we going to ensure that plastic isn't dumped all around the world? A problem that many Canadians were concerned about. Again, I appreciate full well that the representative from the chemical industry has said there has to be advanced recycling, and that you're much for building plastics and chemicals, but quite some time.
Mr. Assassi,
if I could ask you one more time.
Mr. Assassi, I'm sorry to disturb you. I just wanted to pause you for a moment because we're having a lot of trouble hearing you. You keep cutting out. If you could repeat the question, please.
So if I could ask the representative from the chemical industry, in the absence of all this innovation and recognizing the fact that these are time-consuming things, how can we deal with problems such as ensuring that Canadian chemicals and plastics aren't dumped around the world?
Thank you for the question, and you're absolutely right. It's not just one piece, right? Innovation is an important piece. Collection, sorting, advanced recycling techniques, those are another piece. We support extended producer responsibility as well, which is really having the producers commit to taking back their products. But we also support regulation. We think it's an important part of it. It's how you regulate that we're just we're very concerned about, and so we believe that it's really important for the government to fulfill its commitments and to ensure that these plastics do stay out of the environment and that they are properly managed. And we understand that a discussion paper will be distributed in fall, and it will have ideas around prohibitions, but also around management and exemptions as well. So we are fully supportive of the need to manage this issue and the need to manage plastic pollution. So wherever we can, we think there's an opportunity there, particularly when CEPA review is about to take place. So there's an opportunity there to take a look at the legislation and see how we can beef it up or amend it so that it can directly address the issue of plastics in the environment.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Now, I understand your concern is you're saying that the use of the word toxic in the regulations will essentially, according to you, have a chilling effect to come to any conclusive results on that issue. Do you have any estimates? Have you had an opportunity to do any studies that would demonstrate this would be the case?
Well, we do have, as I noted, we have a $4 billion project that has not yet broken ground in Alberta, and that could be impacted. We also have a couple of members that are interested and have been actively pursuing an opportunity in Canada to the tune of $10 billion. But designating plastics as toxic would certainly send that chill in investment, and they have other opportunities. The other concern for us as well is that in terms of our partnership with the United States and Mexico as part of the USMCA, there's certain elements there where we would require a risk assessment if the products were to be declared toxic. So in terms of our regulatory cooperation, we need to ensure that whatever is put in place is something that allows the free flow of goods between Canada and the US, given that our products cross the border several times before they're actually completed.
But so far we have no proof that the use of the word toxic will stand in the way of that.
MP Assassi, apologies, your time is up. Notre prochain tour, c'est...
The next round is for Ms. Vignola. You have 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much. My question is for Mr. Lissa. Mr. Lissa, you mentioned earlier the difficulties truckers encountered during the first weeks of the pandemic. I heard talk of this. I have friends in the family who work in that field. And they were telling me, well, we don't have access to sanitary products. Crossing the border, we crossed into the U.S. What we brought in as food was thrown out. We have trouble with the loading and unloading platforms. We're virtually seen, looked upon as pariahs. Among the measures put in place, which one was the most effective to ensure respect for our truckers and to reduce their stress levels? What you've outlined, we experienced clearly, very intensively. Not necessarily between Quebec and Ontario, because that corridor is a very busy one. But on the American side, it is true when people arrived at the delivery locale, they were often perceived as pariahs, treated that way. People didn't want to sign the documents acknowledging receipt of the merchandise of the delivery. So everyone has a phone, so truckers were encouraged to take a photo of the receiving agent and of the document, and in that way we were certain that we'd be able to get paid. People had lunch boxes, and it did happen that they were refused entry with their lunch boxes, and it was insulting because often they'd called upon a chef to prepare their lunches, their meals, and they were told when they crossed the border they had to throw out their food, their prepared meals. But the Truckers Alliance and the SCQ worked very hard and were able to convince the customs officers that truckers were entitled to their meals and to stop confiscating their food. What you're recounting to us here, the difficulty obtaining signatures and seeing your meals thrown out, for you, for your truckers, is there a monetary loss, a sizable monetary loss involved here? We were very proactive, and we called our clients back and we said, listen, this just doesn't hold water. We communicated electronically afterwards, but I must admit that some people aren't as well organized electronically speaking, and perhaps they lost out a bit. But for us, that was out of the question. If we weren't going to be paid, we didn't deliver. Thank you, Mr. Lissa.
Questions goes to MP Massé. You have the floor for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Hoffman and LaRoche, with regards to health and privacy issues, we heard from the Privacy Commissioner concerns about his capabilities. Right now, he has to go for legal challenges. He can't do administrative monetary penalties and so forth. Just wondering if you have any thoughts with regards to that parameter, as Canadians are concerned about a number of different things. One of them is their privacy, and health data is an issue. So could you maybe elaborate on what you presented and also the Privacy Commissioner's expressions at this committee?
Absolutely. I think privacy is always a very sensitive topic, and we're more careful because we know that the risks relate to consequences that you can't necessarily take back. And it also sets precedent for the future. So when we look at what we've done, the world has moved very conservatively and has either moved forward just a little bit or not moved at all. And because of that, we haven't been able to really see the benefits of data. But in this particular urgency, we've talked to a number of patient groups and we've said, we want to be able to empower you to contribute to science. We want to be fully transparent with you and say, this is the particular data set that we need. And if we can have that under your full consent, it will go to this particular study and it will be used to create these particular tools. And there is a huge traction with patient foundations and our patient advocates that say this is what they want. They want to be able to contribute. Their data matters. They're valued in the system, and they want to be able to do this for science and for Canada. And so I think it's important we talk about this a lot, working with the ecosystem, being across the table with all stakeholders and co-developing with one another. If we do that, then we can ensure that everything that we do are within proper guidelines. So we do speak to our privacy experts and the appropriate authorities, but there is traction for grassroots contribution and challenge definition. So it's not insurmountable is what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you very much. I know I'm out of time, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that wraps up our third round. We have a few minutes remaining, so I will move to MP Dreeshen. You have the floor for the remaining time.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd just like to go back to Madam Deschênes. We were talking earlier about conversion of propane to polypropylene, and you had mentioned that when that particular product, when the polypropylene is exported, that there's no tax associated with that, and because of export issues and so on. However, I guess my question is, when that polypropylene is being used here in Canada, is there a carbon tax on it?
Not yet, because we aren't producing polypropylene in Canada just yet.
Okay, so if you could expand on that.
Yeah, so the Inter-Pipeline broke ground last year and are developing a polypropylene capacity, and they'll be using propane, so natural gas, in order to move that forward. What's really interesting about their facility is that they've been doing greenhouse gas emissions intensity tests, and it will be 65% below global average for greenhouse gas intensity.
Certainly, well, that's great. And I'm just wondering, but still, when it comes to the propane that is being used, there will be a carbon tax that is paid on the propane. Is that not correct?
Not just yet, because right now there is a carbon tax paid on the energy inputs, and because propane is gaseous, it's not yet part of the tax package, but as part of the Clean Fuel Standard, once it moves away from the liquid gases, it will then start looking at gaseous or solid gases, and that's where the taxes will be 2023.
Thank you. So I guess that's my point, because of course, as a farmer, I'm paying a carbon tax on the propane that I'm using. And of course, just to go back to one of the comments that was earlier, it was talking about with transportation, everything else, like how the cost of food, how Canadians are going to end up paying more for the cost of food. Now, quite frankly, we best understand that it's the distribution costs, it's the processing costs, and it's some of the labor costs associated with some of the more refined ones that is bringing up that cost of food. It's not money that's going to the farmers. So I just wanted to make that particular point. One last point, and if I could speak with the Montreal Port Authority, I know that there is, millions of tons of fuel that is coming in through the Montreal port of oil and gas that is coming into there. If there was a future government that chose to disrupt tanker traffic in the St. Lawrence, how much damage could that do to the Port of Montreal?
Montreal has a long history with the petrochemical industry. You may or may not know, but there used to be at least 5 refineries on the island of Montreal. Now there only remains one, operated by Suncor. And there is an extensive tank farm that is actually the distribution hub for the entire Eastern Canada and part of the New England area as well. Petroleum products or liquid bulk represent about 16 million tons out of the 40 million tons that will be handled at the port on an annual basis. So it is a substantial amount of traffic. And not to forget also that there's also another refinery in the Quebec City region on the south shore of Quebec. So having issues or having, let's say, a stricter or I don't know exactly to what extent your question was going as to the restriction to tanker services, but that would be an issue.
Yes, and my point was simply going back to the concept of a moratorium. We've seen that on the West Coast. Has nothing to do with foreign oil, but it's Canadian-based oil that is being disrupted. So that is my point. And again, I realize, Madam Chair, that I'm close to the end, so I will cede my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that is our time for today. I'd like to thank the witnesses again for being with us on a beautiful Friday afternoon. And merci beaucoup pour votre temps.
Thank you so much for your time as well as your testimony.
We'll see you all Monday.